Previously on InnerZension Radio.
What I've observed and what I believe is that anything that you do that improves your relationship with yourself will actually create a stronger relationship with you and other. You'll show up in a stronger way in relationship with other people as well.
Welcome to InnerZension Radio.
Welcome to InnerZension Radio. I'm Chris McCleary, your host. And in this episode, we are taking inner peace to the next level. Thank you for showing up, but I think you're going to be really pleased with the kind of information that we have. In this episode, I recalled a book that I had read quite some time ago. It was for my master's thesis. It was called The Tao of Inner Peace, and it made a huge impression on me. It built a new model of living off of it, as we'll discuss. But I just had to invite Dr. Diane Dreher onto the show to tell us more about what she knows about the Tao. I mean, if you look at all of her books, it's all the Tao. It's all about transformation. It's about yin and yang. And all of a sudden, when we started talking about this topic, I think it was when we were talking before the interview, we started to formulate this idea together that, holy cow, there's not just one state of inner peace, but possibly multiple, and at least two, yin and yang. There's some new revelations about our road to InnerZension in this interview, so make sure you spend time to listen to the whole thing. And by the way, if you have not yet listened to one of these podcasts all the way through, you'll start to notice that I ask the interviewee the same question at the end. And that question is, what is the biggest block to inner peace, and how do we dismantle that? And so every interview will have that towards the end, including Dr. Diane Dreher as well. So also, one more thing, some of her books are going to be at our website, InnerZension.com. Click the button that says radio in the menu, and then go find her episode and peruse her books. It supports the show, and it supports her, and it edifies your mind and increases your inner peace. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this wonderful interview. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm very excited about having Dr. Diane Dreher on the show today. Hi, Diane. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, great. Happy to be here.
Really been looking forward to this. And before we begin, I want to list out just some quick goals of what we're going to be accomplishing. And I do this a little bit differently because I want everybody to know what we're going to be talking about. And so the first item is I want everybody to know who Dr. Diane Dreher is. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Tao, because a lot of her books involve the Tao and maybe what it offers that is missing from Western society. Then we'll get into balance. Then we'll get into transformation. Maybe we need to transform into a balanced life. And then we're going to get into inner peace, and we might hit some other goals along the way. But Diane, who are you?
I am a seeker, a person who's always looking for the next step on the path and a way to connect with other people and to try to make the world a better place.
That's perfect. You are a professor, Santa Clara University. I like how, excuse me, I'm still working through some allergies from California. I do blame California. I love California. That's my only complaint. All right, so Santa Clara University.
In California.
I love how you didn't start with that. You didn't start with all these accolades and labels. I don't know. That's just profoundly humble to me. And so you have a PhD in English from UCLA.
Yes.
You have a counseling degree. You are a certified coach.
Yes.
Right?
with the International Coach Federation. And I don't start off with my name, rank, and serial number, as it were, because my father was an Air Force colonel, and my best friend, Laura's father was, well, one of my best friends, was a master sergeant. And I thought that rank, doesn't really designate the worth of a person. I saw people saluting each other and going through all these maneuvers. I admire excellence. My father was a military pilot. And I admire excellence in lots of different ways, not just rank. So I don't, come out front with my professor rank, and et cetera.
Boy, that must be the reason why I was called to do the introduction this way, to show, that part of you. It's kind of like what I talked about today in my group, which is we carry around all these labels. And a lot of these are bad labels, like I've been traumatized, I'm a victim, I'm this or that. And but a lot of times it's the positive things. They're just as creeping into your inner peace, because anything that damages or
it limits us. It's It's a label is something that you don't put on a person, you put on a pickle jar. Therefore, even if it's a positive label, it limits us from all of the possibilities that we might be in touch with.
Right. Even if it's a collectively acknowledged awesome label, it still limits you.
Yep.
From the human possibility, from your own possibility.
And it limits us to what we have been, not what we are and what we are becoming at this moment.
Wow. Beautifully, beautifully said. So that's not all of Diane, though. She's got a bazillion books. And from the Tao of Inner Peace, that's the one that I fell in love with. That's the first one I got, and it changed my life, and it started a whole new concept that I developed for my master's thesis, but we'll get into that later. Inner Gardening, she talks about the women's Tao wisdom, the Tao of womanhood, your personal renaissance.
Renaissance, yeah.
12 steps to finding your life's true calling. So there's a lot of transformation, a lot of Tao, a lot of balance in here. You seem to be an expert, Diane, in all these topics.
Well, it's the same topic, actually. And I also wrote a book called The Tao of Personal Leadership. It's all about finding our own inner center, staying in a process of discovery, and blending with the energies within and around us in whatever opportunities come before us, whether we're leaders in our lives, personally, professionally, politically, whether we're working in our gardens, we're still working with the energies, the energies of nature, growth, possibility. So it's all the same message, really.
That's beautiful. And I hope that we can get more into that statement here. Why don't we go into the Tao, just in general? What is it? What does it offer us in the Western society that we might be missing?
Oh my. Well, the Tao Te Ching was a book written a little over 25 centuries ago in ancient China during the Warring States period by, we think, a wise man named Lao Tzu. And there are 81 short poems in this book that's been translated more than any other book in the world with the exception of the Bible. It's been a guidebook for innovative thinkers throughout history, inspiring generations, and helping people discover new possibilities, helping people break out of the limiting mindsets that they find themselves in, the labels, the limits, the classifications. For example, Carl Rogers, the humanistic psychologist, who was later in life a peacemaker, used to carry in his wallet a quote from the Tao Te Ching that says, with the best of leaders, when the work is done, the project completed, the people all say, we did it ourselves. Leadership as empowerment, leadership as a way to get the best out of all of us, when we reach our center, when we bring our strengths forward. So it's a very inspirational book, and it's based on the cycles of nature, of dark and light, sunlight and shadow, the strength of bamboo, the power of water, little lessons that people can learn by being out in nature.
That's beautifully said. And the center and balance and the seasonal changes, and you even mentioned leadership might even be a way to lead yourself into a balanced life. Or is that too simplistic?
Oh, that's probably the heart of the Tao Te Ching.
Ah, there we go.
There's so much imbalance in the world around us. And as long as we get stuck in an old paradigm or an old story, identify as a victim, identify as something that happened in our past, even identify as our current profession, only our current profession, we can't see anything other than that. We can't find our way out. So I see the wisdom of the Tao as helping us regain our centers by feeling our connection to the earth, finding a new path of possibility for ourselves, for one another, and for the beautiful planet we call home. It's a way of getting grounded, getting back to basics, being in touch with universal principles of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. I was in the military as well, and regular listeners know that I flew jets, and I switched over to counseling. And part of that journey in my transformation was your Tao of Inner Peace. And I did spend several years on the mountain, out in the middle of nature, no occupation, no money, no income. And I learned how to heal myself. Or was it nature that healed me? Was it my transformation that healed me? But it was a huge transformation. And I couldn't be more grateful for that opportunity. And being grounded to the earth, I know that from experience how important that is, and how balancing it is, and how healing it is. And I'll at one point I'll do a show on the science of grounding and earthing. And but which yin or yang, if you're grounded, is that in the middle? Being grounded, is that, or is that one side or the other?
That's really good. Depends on where we start from, I suppose. The Tao has lots of quotes about the yin and yang. It has one, all life embodies yin and embraces yang, through their union achieving harmony. That nature is comprised of both the energies of yin and the energies of yang. In fact, originally, I understand from my reading that yin and yang meant only the sunny side and the shady side of the same mountain. That we get back in touch with the balance of yin and yang energies by going out into nature. And most often in our culture, we're imbalanced in terms of yang, which is the active principle. People being very, very busy, racing around, action without contemplation. Of course, if you're too contemplative and you don't act at all, you become very static. But there's got to be both. And I think being back in touch with nature helps us find our dynamic balance by observing and by interacting and by touching the energies of nature.
Mm-hmm. So the grounding, you think, is pretty much both. It's gives you both.
Yeah, if a person is imbalanced yin and isn't active, and there are some people, I'm an academic, professors tend to sit at their desks all day or go to the classroom and sit at a desk and talk to the students. So there's
go to counselors.
Too much sitting has been shown to be very bad for our health, worse than smoking, I understand. So that if we are imbalanced with yin and are too sedentary, getting out into nature, taking a walk, breathing in the fresh air and watching the leaves on the trees and feeling the wind and seeing the little animals scurrying around puts us back in touch with more movement, more yang, and helps us find our balance. If we're like some of my neighbors out here in the Silicon Valley, constantly rushing, trying to multitask, doing 2 things or 3 or 4 at once, using their cell phones to text while they're driving, which is terribly dangerous. If people are caught up in excessive yang, going out into nature helps them slow down and get back in touch with their centers that way. Nature is centering.
Mm-hmm. So it's not one or the other. It's really what it is that you need, which is why, the kind of the metaphoric why of why earthing and ecotherapy is so healing.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, there is a science behind, there is a real, and that's not the point of this particular podcast, but I could go into the science that I know of, grounding, but in general, and even, I guess, even the science behind that, I don't want to get too far down into there, but it is towards a balance. It's not a yin or a yang. It's whatever you need.
Absolutely. Brings our energies back into balance. And as you know, there's a lot of empirical research on that fact, which is interesting because poets have known it for centuries. And now scientists are recognizing that the poets were right.
In a lot of different areas of life. Mm-hmm. What do you do that makes you so cheery and joyful, Diane? all your radio shows, you're just beaming and content and happy. It's so clear. It's so obvious. You can feel your aura through the radio waves.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I meditate twice a day, I suppose, to center myself.
What kind of meditation, by the way?
Oh, gosh. I do a passage meditation and a mindfulness meditation. So it depends on where my energies are. If I really need to center down, I'll do a passage meditation and meditate on the prayer of St. Francis, make me an instrument of thy peace, and just center down that way. Sometimes I meditate just being out in my garden. There's so much beauty in the world, actually. Gardening, being in touch with nature. I spend some time in nature every day, even if it's only just time to look up at the sky, which is the greatest show on earth, or from earth, because it's always changing. So I try to connect with beauty, and I try to connect with my center and with the people that I'm interacting with. And I have a sneaky practice. I have all my students center down in meditation before every class I teach.
Oh, yeah. That's just like Saybrook, which we did this past weekend.
Oh, great. So to find what brings us joy, and to connect with that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the joy is on the inside, but what you mentioned were all the things on the outside, the material world, connecting with these things in your environment, bring you that inner sense of joy, which is kind of paradoxical because you go the opposite way. So you get away from the suffering, going into your head and disconnecting and thinking and, racing thoughts and all that, which only causes more anxiety, as you try to problem solve, try to get your way out of this problem, that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We can get stuck in rumination cycles and go around and around and around in negativity. What gets us out of that? A good walk in nature, perhaps, or a visit to a mountaintop, or look at the sky. I've done a lot of study, and I do research in positive psychology, and I try to practice some of the, recommendations, and have my clients and my students follow suit. And there's the gratitude practice, which is just pausing and being grateful for example, for this opportunity to connect with you today and to discover together some of the wisdom of Tao. mean, what a gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that gratitude from my heart as well. The gratitude apparently changes the structure of your brain
Oh, absolutely.
into a better perception, a clearer perception, not just a positive perception of reality, but a clearer perception. Because you can choose to be grateful even despite what it is,
Mm-hmm.
but just being positive about everything. I'm not bad mouthing it, but you can end up pretending things that you don't really like and pretending that they're positive when really you don't believe it subconsciously.
Yeah, that's delusion. That's not healthy.
But
And
gratitude
yeah,
can be a choice, a real choice,
gratitude
no
is
matter
a
what's
choice.
happening.
Right. And there are people who are grateful, even if in the midst of suffering, for the opportunity to connect with someone else or for a person who offers a kind word. And as a therapist, you know that sometimes the deepest and most beautiful interactions are sometimes when people are suffering. And,
Oh,
it's not a happy face type situation, but it's a deep sense of spiritual joy and connection.
oh, that is. I'm so glad that you said that. The spiritual joy.
Hmm.
We had a previous conversation with Nate Terrell, and we had this conversation and went really in depth with it, and we came up with the same thing. But I love that name that you put to it, spiritual joy. That was the word I couldn't use because I had found in deep grief, like deep grief, when someone's missing in my life, that when I allowed that grief to take place deeply, like honestly, and just allowed it acceptance and gratitude, almost, well, I did get to a state of gratitude after a while, but it was hard at first. But there was joy there. It was weird because it wasn't like I'm pretending to be joy. I'm happy now. It's not like that. It's not a material kind of joy.
No, there's a big difference between happiness, fun, and deep spiritual joy, which is, inspiration. One of my professors from graduate school passed, and a number of us former graduate students went to his memorial service. And at the end, he was a Lutheran, so we had this great Lutheran hymn at the end, and we all looked around and we felt a deep sense of joy and gratitude for having had him in our lives, which transcended the sense of loss. And we all
Right.
felt united in that sense of gratitude. It was a beautiful, I still remember it, and it was years ago now.
Do you think that do you think that spiritual joy is there regardless if people recognize it or not? So they're maybe deeply grieving, and maybe one of the persons in the crowd is experiencing that transcendent connection, and that deep spiritual connection and spiritual joy. Do you think that everyone has the opportunity to feel that, or is it more of an internal thing that can only be?
I think it's there as a possibility for all of us because we're all spiritual beings, in my opinion. We have that capacity to be inspired, to feel that we're part of something larger than ourselves, whether we call it nature, spirit, God, higher power, whatever, or just the sense of connection with another human being. We have that, but if we're running around on the surface of life, we don't get in touch with that deep wellspring of our being. And what brings us that? Love, friendship, inspiration, the beauty of nature, some really transcendent poetry, music. It takes us a lot deeper. And I find that depth in studying the Tao Te Ching, which of course has all of this wisdom of nature woven through it.
Well, I find your writing right up there with him. I'm turning to page 104 of the Tao of Inner Peace, and I quote, this is a very important quote to me because this is going to birth my new model, when I was healing up on the mountain. As we become more aware of the natural patterns in our lives, we learn to flow with them. Each of us at times feels outgoing, vibrant, active, yang, and at other times quiet, peaceful, reflective, yin. The Tao person honors these inner rhythms and enjoys the differences. So,
Yes.
it's absolutely beautiful, and I could read the whole book, but that would take forever. But that main paragraph was what birthed a kind of a new model, and here's what I mean. First, I want to get your kind of conception of what balance is in accordance with the Tao. Is it kind of being in the center, or having both yin and yang together at the same time? What is that balance for you?
Oh my gosh. A simple question there, Chris. I see the Tao as and that quote that you mentioned, as a dynamic process. Balance is a dynamic process. Mm-hmm. It's not some perfect static state that we would attain and, then defend and try to remain in, because of course that's not possible. Everything in this world is growing and changing as we speak. Our bodies, we're breathing in and breathing out. Our blood is circulating. The air is circulating around us. So everything is dynamically alive. And my friends who study the new physics will tell me that nothing that looks solid is actually solid. It's all particles and waves. So given that, a sense of being balanced is being dynamically balanced, being aware of the energies within and around us, and finding harmony in our choices. And I learned that, I suppose, when I was training in Aikido, which is a very Taoist martial art. It's non-violent. We're supposed to be able to disarm an aggressor without harming that person. So if a person comes charging at you, you step off the line and you just sort of blend with that person's energies, take their hand and turn them around in a somersault and, disarm the opposition. In order to do that, I would have to be centered. I'd have to find my own center and center down, take a deep breath, and the center is 2 inches below the navel. It's called the hara. So I'd have to be centered, and then I'd find my center within that dynamic spiral of the person attacking me. And then, amazingly enough, I weigh 125 pounds. I could throw somebody who weighed twice as much as I do.
Wow.
With that person's energy.
Right. You use their motivation or their
momentum. Absolutely. Sent them flying off in a little somersault, and no one was injured. So that balance is balancing the energies within us with the energies around us. And in order to do that, to be mindful, to be centered, and to take that deep breath into center and be aware of where we are and what we're doing.
Okay, well, very well said again. Being aware of where you are is the important one, not where you are at the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No matter where you are in this dynamic flow, and in terms of energy levels, like you said, ready to go and do stuff, or ready to go and just be. You got those two basic states, yin and yang, and neither one is right, but we tend to get stuck in one or the other.
Yes.
Right?
That's a Western mind. We tend to fall into polarization, what the linguists call the logical fallacy of the false dilemma. Either or, all or nothing, right or wrong. There are only two possibilities according to, the dualism of Western culture. And of course, we live in a three-dimensional universe, and there's all this dynamic Tao energy in nature, but we can get stuck in either extreme. And this does occasionally happen in politics too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And
absolutely.
Then people can't see any positive opportunities. It's either one extreme or the other extreme.
Right.
And then we get stuck. which is sad.
When you're finally balanced, and we have to talk about how to get to balance, basically. But we've already talked about one of those, which is go outside and experience nature. But when you're finally balanced, is there a point where your balanced state is negatively impacting everyone else's state? Like you're too balanced, or or does that only come when you're too yin? Because you had talked about one of those examples where you got him and her, and one of them's always working and the other one's always laying on the couch.
Yeah.
And that's easy. If you're truly balanced, would it then mean that you're generally not going to instigate problems unless the other people are unbalanced?
Well, ideally, a balanced person can change the energies around him or her. There's a positive psychologist, Barbara Fredrickson, who has her latest researches on something called Love 2.0, and saying that the little connections that we make with someone else could be somebody, standing in front of us in line, or the clerk in the store, or, our best friend, or someone in our family. But to really connect with someone, it raises the energy level. So if you have a balanced person who's coming from a space of joy, walks into a room, and it changes the energy of the room. It affects the people around him or her. It doesn't bring them down. It makes them feel connected. And it's what we need more of, actually, in our country, is our balanced people, because they can share that balance. And an imbalanced person, like a rotten apple in a barrel of apples, can infect the whole group. So our energies always affect the people around us. We breathe the same air, and our physical energies, even across the airwaves when we're communicating, can affect the person on the other side.
That's kind of like, you're being very quiet and stoic, but you're very nervous, and the horse, who is very empathetic, can pick up on you being really anxious, even though you're not displaying any anxiety.
Oh,
right?
yes.
That energy changes everything, and they buck up and do all this stuff, right?
Yeah. In fact, what's interesting is we have a horse, and also I have a little dog. Animals tune into our energies really well. They're not distracted by language. And whereas human beings can be all in our heads, and, a person can say, "How are you doing?" And the person can say, "Oh, I'm fine."
Right.
The dog and the horse know that
I'm not mad.
Yeah, but we can get distracted. We can say, "Oh, the person said he was fine."
Uh-huh.
Can't fool a horse, can't fool a dog.
Right. Yeah, I love your answers. All right, on to the next one.
Okay.
You want to talk a little bit about transformation? I know it's near and dear to your heart. We do need to get into inner peace, but I want to give you a chance to talk about transformation. We can do it later if you'd like.
Okay.
Maybe do a whole
Transformation. That's probably a lifelong answer to that question. I think we're here to transform, to transcend, and to keep growing, to have what one psychologist, Carol Dweck, calls a growth mindset, or what Abraham Maslow called self-actualization.
Uh-huh.
We're on a journey of discovery. And to forget that fact is to give up, to surrender to all kinds of materialistic definitions of success, instead of to be on that journey of transformation. And it's different for each person. I wrote a book called, Your Personal Renaissance, which was about transformation in terms of discovering our calling. And well, I could go into that in great depth, but I will try not to, because, we have a limited amount of time. But in the Renaissance, all of a sudden, people woke up and realized that every individual has a certain set of strengths or gifts, and that we all have different strengths and gifts, and that we're all individuals. And they started painting portraits, recognizing that people look different. Amazing. And all these artists started discovering their calling, scientists, writers, you have the Renaissance, because people believe that God had given them a particular set of gifts, and it was their duty and their destiny to develop them and to use them to fulfill their lives and also to serve the world. So you have just everybody waking up to what their possibilities were, and it was really an exciting time. And fast forward hundreds of years later, the positive psychologist Martin Seligman and his colleagues have discovered that we have signature strengths. They did a big survey of all the cultures in the world back through history from about the year 2000, looking at all their writings, and found out that even though we differ in many ways and have many conflicts, that the cultures of the world have agreed that we have 24 character strengths that are common to humankind, and that we could take a survey on the VIA strengths or AuthenticHappiness.org and find out what our top strengths are. Or else we can just discover our strengths by realizing what brings us joy and meaning, what we're good at, what we love to do. Mm-hmm. And the more that we do those things, the more we really develop our potential, and the more we transcend where we came from and go into really a higher level of awareness, joy, and service, discovering our calling, which must be what you did when you made that big transformation from fighter pilot to therapist.
Yeah, big time. And yeah, I was when I teach. I went through Edgar Casey's Atlantic University.
Wow.
As one of my degrees, and they had a class called Finding Your Mission in Life. Mm-hmm. And he said that one of the hallmark features of a life purpose is that it touches other people's lives, or it adds value to other people's lives. And I don't know, what do you think about that? Does that ring true, or can you have a life purpose that's just all by yourself?
I can't imagine a life purpose that would be all by ourselves, because I believe that we're all connected. And, a true vocation in the Renaissance sense is a combination of self-actualization and altruism. Mm-hmm. It's and there are many different ways of being that way. I have a friend who's a concert pianist, and it's a joy to go listen to her play, and she seems to enjoy playing the piano as well. So it's a gift to her, and it's a gift to her audience. I have friends who are research scientists, and they love exploring and discovering things. And some of their discoveries are going to help people heal. So, it's a win-win. I can't imagine. I'm teaching a course actually this quarter for undergraduates to help them try to find their callings, and they have to meditate at the beginning of every class, and read about somebody who has discovered calling, read some studies, and they're supposed to make a connection between what they love to do, where they find meaning, and what their deepest values are.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, your deepest values. Mm-hmm. Very important.
Because when I was in graduate school, I used to love to ski, but I couldn't find any way. It was enjoyable, but I couldn't find any way of sharing that meaning with other people. So that was a hobby, something I loved, but it wasn't my vocation.
And just to be clear, some people have to do their life purpose through a hobby. Mm-hmm. So just because it's a hobby doesn't mean, oh, well, woe is me, I'm not doing my life mission. As long as you're doing it, you may not get paid for it. I think that's the bigger point.
Yeah, there are lots of people who have done that. The person who invented the microscope, Anton von Leeuwenhoek, way back in the Renaissance, was a cloth merchant, and he got involved looking through magnifying glasses to examine the cloth, and he made his magnifying glasses stronger and stronger until he invented the microscope. and he became a member of the Royal Society. He published his findings. He started looking at his drinking water through his device and was totally shocked to see little things swimming around in the water. So he became a research scientist, but his job was cloth merchant. Sometimes we have to do something to pay the bills. Sometimes we have to do something to follow our hearts. Sometimes we have two different paths.
Such a perfect example. I love these colorful answers. All right, we got to get to the tough topic here of inner peace, and I want us both to come up with a definition or a statement about what is true inner peace, and the inner peace that doesn't waver. Does it change from time to time, or is it just static? Is it just as you go around life?
Oh, sure.
There's different kinds of inner peace.
I think that is a real wonderful metaphysical question. Inner peace is not, I can't imagine just sitting in meditation all the time. For one thing, I have a job at the university. And
you have a life mission.
Yeah, right. I write and I do other things, so I can't just sit there and be, in nirvana all the time. I mean, that's just not who I am. There are some people in Tibet apparently who have done that, but for most of us, especially in the Western world, we have to be up and about, and so inner peace has to be something that we bring with us, and it has to be dynamic, because sometimes inner peace might mean, being very active and hiking or speaking or playing a musical instrument, teaching a class, interviewing people. And sometimes inner peace might involve sitting very quietly and meditating or reading. It's not a question of what we do. It's how we feel in balance, present with what we're doing.
And are you allowed to feel maybe anger? Someone stole some money from you. Are you allowed to feel anger? Or as long as you're aware of the anger, is that inner peace?
That's a really good question. I think we have to feel our feelings because they're signals, they're parts of who we are. But when we get hijacked by our feelings and, become reactive, we obviously lose our inner peace. John Kabat-Zinn's studies in mindfulness show that when we acknowledge our feelings, we remain centered. We come back to center. We can say, oh, anger, and then we can mindfully find a way to respond to that anger without just reacting. I think there's a difference between response and reaction.
And then you throw in the gasoline of thoughts. Say, the thinking then generates this whole story that is all made up or half made up, and then it really ignites the fire or the emotion. Then you really get angry, slam the door, and react like you said, unconsciously, more than likely. So it sounds like part of inner peace, or at least one of the things that always has to happen, is that you're aware of your feelings, aware of your, kind of an inventory of yourself.
Mm-hmm. We're centered, we're mindful of our feelings.
But not hyper aware, hyper sensitive to everything, or, too self-condemning, or, there's no labeling or judgments in there. That's kind of like mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Just to be aware and say, not to deny it, because if we deny something and stuff it down, it'll just erupt like a volcano later or make us sick. But also not to be hijacked by it, but to recognize it. Mm-hmm. One example, I guess, is that years ago when I was writing Your Personal Renaissance, actually, I was really disgusted with our government for not doing enough to take care of New Orleans, which is where my godfather and a lot of my cousins used to live before, the great floods, Hurricane Katrina and all that. And I thought, And I was being hijacked by unwelcome and unhelpful thoughts of resentment and anger against our federal government. And finally, I realized that wasn't helping New Orleans. It wasn't helping me.
Right.
And I said, okay, so I'm feeling angry. This is why I feel like the government has neglected New Orleans. Well, what can I do about it? So I decided to tithe from the royalties of that book to Habitat New Orleans. And
wow.
I thought,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Your emotion is doing nothing really in the material world, just making you resistant and making you probably sick because your immune system is starting
right,
to
it
down.
messes up their immune system. And yet we can channel that anger energy once we've recognized it and said, okay, what am I upset about here? And what can I do about it?
Yeah, that's true. A lot of these emotions are call to action.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of the happy ones, but even some of the negative ones are like fear is save yourself. Like there's a threat, so survive.
Yeah.
If you didn't have any fear, then you'd go out and touch the big snake and it would bite you, or you'd try to pet the lion.
Yeah, right.
Or walk off the cliff.
Our emotions they're important signals, in a sense, emotion, energy, and motion. So how do we use that energy, optimally?
And I'm thinking that halfway to inner peace, when you're really getting good at it, you might fall into the trap of just being inactive. Like, okay, I'm aware, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And
I think that's too much yin.
Yeah, right. Right. So there is action in inner peace.
Yes.
It has to be the yang in inner peace. There has to be
It has to be yin and yang both.
Oh, I love it.
Awareness and action.
I love it. All right, you ready for the really tough question? What are the biggest blocks to inner peace, and how do we resolve that?
Okay, biggest blocks to inner peace. Well, there are quite a few, but here are probably a couple of them. Is that we can be too much yang in our culture. We can get too busy, and we can become news junkies, and there's a difference between news and noise. If we're just hearing a bunch of noise that throws us off center, it blocks our access to our inner wisdom. It takes us away from the wisdom of yin. So we need more yin practices in our culture. We need time to pause, a mindful pause, a contemplative practice at some point in the day to just get back to center, get back in touch with the heart of who we are. And, to get away from the noise, to turn off the noise. That's one thing.
So a lot of chatter. And I think
there's a lot of it. And a lot of it is enticing and intriguing, but too much of it, it's like eating junk food. It's like junk food for the mind. It throws us off.
You talked about that in the Tao of Inner Peace on page 84. It says, the Tao says, much chatter brings only exhaustion. Stay true to your center.
Absolutely. Too much chatter will do that. Yeah. And, that's too much yang in our culture. And, the blessing of the internet, we've got all this commotion. We've got all these channels. We can have so much noise that we never need to think our own thoughts or be in touch with our centers for the rest of our lives. But, again, that's unhealthy. That would keep us from inner peace. Another block to inner peace is the false dilemma that, as I said before, that in the West, we tend to see things in terms of either or. Mm-hmm. And whenever we have a conflict, we can think, well, I want my way, and the other person is wrong. And of course, that doesn't resolve the conflict. At one point, I wrote a Psych Today blog post about conflict resolution, trying to convey the wisdom of Tao in terms that a lay audience could understand. And I said, well, what if you were on a retreat with a group of people, and you'd gone to a mountain cabin and stopped on the way up to get groceries, and you were making dinner, and one person was making lemon chicken and another person was making lemon poppy seed cake, and you both needed a lemon, and there was only one lemon there on the counter that you bought. Too late to go back to the store. What do? You could fight over the lemon, and conflict becomes combat, and one person recipe would suffer, and the whole group would not have as good a meal. You could cut it in half, which is compromise, which is the best that a lot of people can think of, and you'd each have half a lemon. Or you could talk to each other and say, well, what do you need? And find out that one person needs lemon juice for the lemon chicken, and the other person needs lemon zest off the rind of the lemon for the cake. And so the person says, oh, okay, fine, I'll just grind this off, and then I hand you the lemon. You've got the lemon juice. We both benefit. It's not either or. That's cooperation. That's harmony. And that kind of harmony, bringing two sides together, two people together to listen and to honor each other's needs, is, I think, the wisdom of Tao. And it brings not only inner peace, but also external peace, because people learn to work through conflicts.
As above, so below.
You bet. So that
peace,
was
creating peace in the outside.
Yeah, and in order to create peace around us, we have to find a way to find peace within us, because when we're really stressed, we can't see straight. We can't hear other people. We can't find that peace. We lose our clarity. So we need that.
I knew I got that somewhere. Been teaching people this not higher level, it's just real negotiation. I once read a book called How to Negotiate and Win Every Time. Well, that's a contradiction of what really real negotiation really is. I don't like that meeting in the middle thing and just compromising like you talked about. I like developing a solution where both of us win. Both of us have a higher state than where we were before we started the negotiation. And that should be true in all cases, in all problem areas. But our society is one winner, one loser.
Yeah, and think how limiting that is. We have all these different perspectives, all these different people, all these different possibilities. No two human beings from the beginning of time have had the same fingerprints, not even identical twins. And yet we reduce everything to either one extreme or the other, either or. I mean, what impoverishment is that?
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, you got any more?
Okay. Yes, another thing that interferes with inner peace is looking outside ourselves to find ourselves. For example, I don't know about where you are, but we're getting lots of ads for mattresses and pillows and sleeping pills on, the news, advertisements. And I'm thinking, what does this say about people? They must be so stressed they can't sleep.
I see it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's sadly funny or, humorously pathetic. What we need is inner peace. We don't need to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a new mattress unless the old mattress is totally falling apart. And yet our culture tends to sell people, you need to buy this thing and then you will feel better. And consumerism has become, rampant, and it distracts us from our inner wisdom and from really finding something that's enduring, that's meaningful, that's really going to, bring us inner peace. Inner peace cannot be purchased.
Right. Yeah. I got a lot of things to say about sleep. It's interesting that you brought that example in because, a lot of this EMF thing and this just industrialization of the world is bringing our ion state out of whack and causing us to not be able to sleep as well. We're not as grounded as we were. It goes back to our original discussion. And sleep is at the fundamental aspect of inner peace. It's just not happening. You don't get any sleep, you're not going to have inner peace. And so you picked a great example. Our very first discussion was J.M. DeBoard, and he talked all about the importance of sleep and dreams, both very important. So anyway, thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that.
And actually, we should spend about a third of our time, or maybe, well, yes, okay. 8 times 3 is 24, right? 8 hours of sleep. So that there's a yin and yang balance between sleep and our active waking hours, and that there's supposed to be that kind of balance. Some people need more sleep than others, but out here, it's really pathetic. A lot of people I know, don't get nearly enough sleep, and they're running around with sleep debt, which runs down their energies, their ability to center, their ability to solve problems. It makes them impatient. They eat poorly. I mean, it just cascades.
Depression, immune system breakdown.
Bet.
And most of all, it destroys your brain.
Yeah.
According to Dr. Amen.
Yeah. Because we need our memory. The hippocampus part of our brain loads new memories at night when we're asleep. So students at my school who stay up all night studying for a midterm, guess what? They can't remember anything because their brain hasn't loaded in their memories. It's sad. But instead of saying, oh, my system is out of balance, I need to find a way to center down and relax, to have some kind of mindfulness practice before I go to sleep, maybe do some yoga, whatever helps a person calm down. Instead, our culture says, oh, well, you need to go out and buy a product.
Mm-hmm.
Get a new bed, a pill, a product, that'll do it for you. Only looking outside ourselves to find ourselves. We won't find ourselves out there.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, there's a quote from the Tao that I really like, which is Tao 11. 30 spokes meet at the wheel's axis. The center space makes the wheel useful. Form clay into a cup. The center space gives it purpose. Frame doors and windows for a house. The openings make the house useful. Therefore, purpose comes from what is there because of what is not there.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great.
That's that open space. We all need that.
Yeah, that's even goes at the core of like cells and, these tiny particles they're finding is like 99.9999% emptiness, space. And the new hypotheses are like there's infinite amount of energy in that space. So people trying to tap into that through various methods, but that's beyond my expertise.
And maybe we tap into it by getting out of our busyness mind, and into a contemplative space.
Maybe that emptiness is where ingenuity and creativity comes from, because you have to be relaxed and, yin, very yin, open, accepting, whatever else in that state, relaxed. I think I already said that.
Yeah, that's the creative process. It's the second stage in the creative process. What is it? Preparation, incubation, inspiration, and verification. Without incubation, without that empty space, which is why Einstein used to get lots of good ideas when he was out sailing, in touch with the wind, in touch with the dynamic energies of nature and Tao. Then he'd get all these great ideas and he'd go back to his lab and he'd work on them and, new insights. People get insights in the shower or when they wake up in the morning. We need that.
That hypnagogia creativity area space. There's some old inventors who would like hold a rock while they're sitting down. They have these vexing problems they couldn't figure out. And so they'd hold a rock and they would, take a nap, fall asleep in their chair. And when they fell asleep, the hand would open up and the rock would fall and wake them up. Hit the ground and make a noise, and right when they woke up, they were hoping that the divergent mind or the hypnagogia would suddenly give them the aha. So they would fabricate these aha moments on purpose. They're great. I've had a lot of these, and just waking up in the morning. I think it really is. It's true. It's when you go to sleep and you've got a problem and you don't know which way to decide. And like one time, I was making a Tesla coil, some electrical components, alternative electricity, and I had this little chip, and I had a decision between one chip and the other chip. The one chip was called 555. And so I was like, this is too late. I don't know which one to choose. So I went to sleep, and I woke up, and it was 5 until 6. And I go, oh gosh, this is way too early. And then my eyes popped open. I go, you got to be kidding me. It's 555. So my subconscious apparently had known the answer and woken me up at the right time, or just sheer coincidence. I don't think.
I think there are more examples of that with inventive, creative people throughout time for it to be a coincidence. I think that when we trust the process, we access that wisdom of Yin. And actually, there's research from Ap Dijksterhuis and his colleagues in the Netherlands about the fact that our intuition helps us find solutions that are to complex problems. Simple problems our conscious mind can handle, but our conscious mind can only hold so much information at a time, whereas, it's like what's on our screen in the computer. But our unconscious mind, has all kinds of things that are filed away, and perhaps even access to things that we've never even known. And so when we give it over to that larger consciousness, higher consciousness, we get incredible insights.
Yeah. Diane, what an amazing interview. I can't stop talking to you, but we have to. How do people find you and get more of your stuff?
Oh, good question. Well, I'm on the internet. DianeDreher.com is my Authors Guild website, that's probably the best way to reach me. I also have NorthstarPersonalCoaching.com, but it would be easier, Diane, DianeDreher.com, with ways to reach me, a link to my Psychology Today blog, books, and I'd be happy to hear from people. And it's been a real pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you so much. And I will have, hopefully try to get all of your books on the little, on the website. If you go to the website to listen to this, then you get to see all of her books and be able to peruse. You can even purchase it from there. And it doesn't cost you any extra, but InnerZension gets a little cut. So that would just be supporting our podcast, and we would appreciate it. But Diane, wow, I am so happy that you said, yes to coming on the show, because it was just amazing. And I have so many more questions for you. So I'm hoping that we can chat again sometime.
That would be my pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, until next time, thanks, Diane. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Welcome to InnerZension Radio.